Welcome to today's Explainer. Now, we're not just going to sit here and rattle off dates and battlefields. No, we're stepping right back into a massive rupture that literally altered the course of human history. This was an absolute, cinematic war of ideas.
So ask yourself, what if one of the most powerful empires in the world lost control because of ideas? Just imagine the sheer rising tension, the secret whispers of dissent in candlelit taverns, the scratching of quills on parchment that would eventually bring the mighty British crown to its absolute knees.
Act 1. The Pressure Cooker.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. It's 1763. Great Britain just won the 7 Years' War, but they are drowning in massive debt. And their solution? Make the 13 colonies foot the bill. The escalation here is just breathtaking. 1764 hits, we get the Sugar Act. 1765, the Stamp Act. Colonists are absolutely furious. I mean, taxation without representation, right? Then, British troops literally occupy Boston, which sparks the deadly Boston Massacre in 1770. Fast forward to 1773, disguised Bostonians dump chests of East India tea right into the harbor. It's the ultimate act of defiance. And by 1774, the colonies actually unite to form the First Continental Congress. The breaking point? Yeah, it's officially here.
Act 2. The Pen and the Sword.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that a true rebellion needs way more than just anger. It needs a philosophy. Enter 1776. On one hand, you've got the colonies facing what they honestly viewed as the absolute tyranny of King George III. On the other, this explosive little pamphlet called Common Sense, written by an immigrant named Thomas Paine. He basically injected this radical, democratic spirit right into the public bloodstream, boldly declaring that in free countries, the law ought to be king. Total game changer.
You know, Common Sense became an all-time American bestseller practically overnight. Paine wrote in this electric, everyday prose, basically begging the colonies to drop their internal squabbles. His main point was crystal clear. Only continental authority can regulate continental matters. He was forcefully pushing the colonists away from British ruin and completely seizing the court of public opinion.
And these texts, they weren't just politely listing grievances, they were actively tearing down the old world. Paine literally condemned the institution of monarchy itself as an affront to God, famously calling the king the royal brute of Britain. Words were quite literally fueling a rebellion here, making the push for independence feel like an absolute moral imperative.
All of that incredible ideological momentum finally culminated in the summer of 1776. Drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence carried just an unimaginable weight. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. In just over 1,300 words, it created a totally new political vocabulary for the entire world.
But of course, ideals drafted on parchment had to survive the brutal, physical reality of the battlefield. This ideological rupture instantly became a crucible of war the moment General George Washington took command of the Continental Army. The lofty ideas of 1776 were now marching straight into a literal storm of cannon fire and British redcoats.
And make no mistake, the price of independence required immense sacrifice. Take the siege of Boston, for example. For 11 grueling months, American militiamen, who were often freezing and critically, dangerously low on gunpowder, managed to contain British troops within the city. It was this tense, incredible psychological standoff that proved, beyond a doubt, that a unified colonial force could actually stand up to a global superpower.
The Revolutionary War itself was this grinding, brutal conflict, just full of shifting momentum. There were devastating losses, but also incredible endurance, driven by American perseverance and, let's be honest, absolutely crucial French support. The tide finally turned. By 1781, British forces under Lord Cornwallis were besieged and forced to surrender at Yorktown. It was a staggering, decisive defeat for the British Empire.
But we have to remember, this victory wasn't just won by generals on a battlefield. It was a true people's war. You had women like Abigail Adams stepping up to manage businesses and actively shape political ideals. Native American leaders were trying to navigate this rapidly shifting, dangerous frontier. Enslaved Africans were forced to wait incredibly complex promises of freedom from both the British and the Americans. And financial backers like John Hancock literally paid to keep the troops supplied. This was a profoundly complex civil struggle from top to bottom.
Act 3. A New World.
Eventually, the guns fell silent and the United States was officially recognized as an independent nation.
But the hardest work was really just beginning. Because tearing down an empire is one thing, building a constitutional republic from scratch, that's a whole different ballgame. They were left with the awesome, overwhelming task of living up to the Declaration's radical promises. They literally had it in their power, just as Thomas Paine wrote, to begin the world over again.
And this brilliantly illustrates something absolutely crucial. The story of that founding didn't just end when the war was over. Its survival heavily dependent on preservation. We're talking about the careful protection of rough drafts, official records of the Continental Congress, those incredibly insightful letters between John and Abigail Adams, and printed broadsides like the Pennsylvania Gazette. Our founding wasn't just a fleeting event. It survives today because it is a carefully preserved record.
When you step back and look at the entirety of this epic journey, it's just staggering. A revolution began as protest and became the foundation of a nation.
Because the ideas captured on those aged parchments, they aren't trapped in the 18th century. History is never just about the past. It shapes every freedom you live today. So as you look at the world around you, ask yourself, which of those radical ideas from 1776 are we still fighting for today? Thanks for diving into this incredible explainer with me. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.